Okay, settle down, you rebels and rule breakers. Welcome to the very first official, no-holds-barred episode of Don't Tell Me What to Do. I'm your host, Nancy Lyons, and if you're here, it's probably because you're tired of being told what to do. I mean, I'm just imagining. Or maybe you're tired of being told how to think or who to be. Good. You're in the right place. Now, let's get real. Launching a podcast, it's a whole thing, and I have determined I'm not good at it. There are checklists and best practices and about 1 million people telling you how to do it right. And you know what I say to that? I say, don't tell me what to do. This show is my answer to all the corporate BS, the performative leadership, and the endless parade of shoulds that keep us from actually getting to the good stuff, the real stuff. The messy, glorious, sometimes infuriating stuff of building a life and a career on your own terms. And speaking of messy, let me tell you about recording this very first episode. You know that feeling when you're just not quite there? Like your brain is running a whole ass marathon, but your body is still stuck back at the starting line? Yeah, that was totally me. I had some technical issues, some glitches, and a few can you hear me now moments. And honestly, I was probably about 40% present in my own body. And my inner monologue was less wise sage and more like, did I remember to turn the stove off? It was a masterclass in how not to be grounded and present. And yet here we are, because sometimes you just got to roll with it. You got to show up even when you're a little ungrounded or a little off kilter or, just not yourself, and trust that magic will still happen. And the magic absolutely happened. No thanks to me, because my very first guest, the woman who bravely stepped in and agreed to take part in this inaugural chaos with me, is none other than Larissa Loden. Now, if you don't know Larissa, you're about to. She's the founder and the fire starter behind Larissa Loden Jewelry, which is a brand that quite literally dares you to be your fucking self. She's a former art teacher who built a multi-million-dollar business by breaking literally every rule in the book. And she calls herself, and we're going to talk about this, the world's okayest entrepreneur. And let me tell you, that is a level of self-effacing honesty that I can deeply appreciate. She is a force for good in the world, in her community, in the jewelry industry. She's a fierce advocate for social justice, and she's not afraid to put her money where her mouth is. She's everything this podcast is about: autonomy and rebellion and building something real, even when everyone else is telling you to color inside the lines. Do it the way you're supposed to do it. So do me a favor. Grab yourself a beverage, whatever your favorite beverage is. Get comfortable. I am clearly not in a soundproof podcast studio. If you're watching the video, you will see that I am on a screen porch listening to the birds sing. And only moments ago, some neighbor was gunning their very, very loud muffler for all of us to hear. I hope you heard it. But I want you to get comfy in a screen porch of your own, outside on a bench. Go sit in the yard, pop in your earbuds, get comfortable, and prepare to be inspired and challenged, and maybe also a little bit provoked, because this conversation with Larissa, well, it's a masterclass in not letting anyone tell you what to do. So, my very first guest, my very first episode of Don't Tell Me What to Do, featuring Larissa Loden. I'm super glad you're here for it. Let's do this. Don't tell me what to do. Oh, yeah! I'm Nancy Lyons, and this is Don't Tell Me What to Do, the show for people who are tired of the same old script. And for the very first episode of this podcast, I wanted someone who has never once followed a script, someone who was told to stay in her lane, and instead she built a whole new road. My guest today is Larissa Loden. She's a former art teacher turned accidental entrepreneur who built a jewelry empire Should we call it an empire? Jewelry company from her kitchen table into a nationally recognized brand with a store at the Mall of America. You had a store at the Mall of America. That's a big ass deal. She calls herself the world's okayest entrepreneur, which, if you know anything about how hard she works, is the most Larissa Loden thing she could possibly say. Here's what I love about Larissa. She made a hat that says fuck on it and sold it as a business strategy. She's donated over $150,000 to causes like reproductive rights, immigrant communities, and mutual aid, not quietly, not after checking with the PR team, but loudly and totally on purpose. And when Minneapolis was reeling after the murder of George Floyd, she didn't issue a statement. She got to work. She's a weirdo. She's a builder. She's a mom. She's someone who has figured out how to run a values-driven business without ever pretending to have it all figured out. And she's my friend. So, Larissa, welcome to Don't Tell Me What to Do.
I'm so excited to be here. And especially like inaugural guest. Hell yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Nancy.
Well, I had to do it because I knew I wouldn't have my proverbial shit together. So I also needed somebody who liked me enough to be forgiving. So you've just sat here for a half an hour while we tried to get our audio straight. And I really appreciate that too.
As a person that's had a podcast, it's a huge undertaking. So I was like, oh yeah, I get this. So trust me, I understand. Yeah. So yes.
Yes. Well, I figured you would, and I appreciate your patience. And I think you're the perfect first guest for Don't Tell Me What to Do because, I think that I've watched your career over the last, decade and watched you build this brand, but also watched you stay entirely who you are. I haven't seen you compromise at all. And granted, a lot of that is from a distance, but I feel like, with Larissa Loden, what you see is what you get. And I feel like your brand is true to your values, but I'm super curious and I'd like to dive into some questions if you're okay with it. Like, you were an art teacher.
Yes.
And now you're a CEO. Yeah. So when did you realize that you were actually the boss and not just a lady with a little crafty hobby?
I think it's like, the word boss is like such an interesting term because I honestly, I'm like, you say the word boss and I'm like, have I ever felt like, I think there's like boss and then there's like leadership and everything like that. And I very much so I knew that I ran a business from like a very early on age, but like, the idea of boss to me also meant like, oh, like you have to be a leader and you have to have all of these things together and everything. And that always felt like very disconnected for me. But I think now in the past couple of years, I think I've now really embraced the word boss, but also making it very much so being like, I'm not compromising on my vision or what I want or anything. But it really like, I would say for honestly, like the first, like from being an art teacher and everything, I was really like the person that gave me permission to go out and do, like, I had to get permission because I grew up in a small business family where it was just like feast or famine all the time. And I was like, I saw entrepreneurship and I was like, I don't want any part of that. Fuck that. And so I really like decided then to go into the very secure profession of art education, which is honestly, like, it taught me a lot. It was super hard though. Like everything is like rose-colored glasses in the back, when you think back on shit, because I was like, there were so many times I came home just like, like crying just because it's like, it's a hard job, and I also worked with middle school students, which somebody once said like, you're really good at middle school. And I was like, is that something you want to be good at? I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, and it really just got to this point where I was teaching part-time, and then I'd like pretty much I always say like I was working at my school from 8 to 12, and then from 12 to 8 I was working on my business where I had employees. And then at some point, like somebody was like, you can always come back to teaching, but you kind of get one shot at this. And I was like, oh yeah, I got it. Like I can always come back to this. Like it's not going away. And then I was like, okay, so we'll go and give this a try. But I had no idea what I was doing. Like I grew up in small business, but it was so like chaotically run. Like it was kind of like standard entrepreneurship. And so I was like, I think I then studied all of the books and all of the tactics, and I got really heady, I think, for a really long time. Like a lot of people do, where they're just like, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm just going to read everything. And then you're just like, you forget who you are, I think, in the process.
I love that. I love that you call yourself the world's okayest entrepreneur. And most entrepreneurs that I've met over the years have become entrepreneurs by accident. Um, and sometimes I think that's why we sort of we're sort of like stupid, honest, and humble about our accomplishments. But do you think calling yourself the world's okayest entrepreneur is a defense mechanism, or do you think that's just you being radically honest?
I think it's me being radically honest. Like, I kind of got to this idea of chaos because I like put like the world's okayest mom on some stuff before, because I very much so really repel against this idea of like world's greatest mom. Like, it's like people give it to mom as gifts all the time for like Mother's Day, and like I don't know one fucking mom that feels like she's the greatest. It's like a hard ass job. And like sometimes you're like, all right, like I did all right. And then most of the time you're like, they are fed and clothed. Like, this is good. And I feel, to be honest, like with entrepreneurship as well, like it's like when you're raising your kid for the first time, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. Like, where you are that day is the first time you've ever been there with that kid, because it's that they're that age for the first time. And honestly, entrepreneurialism is like the same exact fucking thing. Like, where my business is today is the first time it's ever been at this phase. And like, I'm always kind of winging it, to be honest. And that's why I want people to embrace more of this idea of okayest entrepreneurism, because you don't, like, you're just kind of figuring it out. And there's this immense pressure I've always felt as an entrepreneur, like leading people on your teams. Like, they're like, you have to have it all figured out. Like, you're the single source of all the answers and everything. And like, sometimes I'm like, you guys know, I'm just winging it. And like, if something needs research or I just am like, fucking like, we're going to figure it out. Like, I don't have all of the answers and I'm gonna fuck up. I think when I've felt the pressure as a leader that I'm always like, I have to be like, kind of like I have all like infallible, like, I won't fuck up, or like, there is this feeling of like perfect, like leading teams, like, and all of this. And I'm like, no, like I it's impossible. It just cannot happen. So I think that's where we just have to embrace that as entrepreneurs and be like, I am gonna fuck up and it's okay.
Totally. Do you think that the way we talk about entrepreneurism in this country is do you think it's really sort of narrow? And I ask this because it shouldn't be unusual for you to acknowledge that you don't know what you're doing, but we aren't really trained to do that. And I think the big stories we hear about entrepreneurism are the big romantic, sensational success stories. And there is no gray area. There's nothing in between. There's the absolute failures. We never hear from them again. And the Mark Zuckerbergs, I invented a multi-billion-dollar corporation in my dorm room, and now I own half of Hawaii. What do you think about, just sort of the cultural conversation around entrepreneurship and how that impacts people's desire to actually try it?
I think it is super narrow. And I think it's really like unfortunate. Like I'm actually like searching it a little bit, a ton as myself. Like, I do coaching on the side because I got coached, and so I have coaching clients, and I really kind of go around this idea of like, what is enough, because it is very black or white. It's either like you are the Mark Zuckerberg, like, you've got billions of dollars, you're scaling your company at all costs, or, it's a failure. And like, that's the only extremes. And there's for the majority of entrepreneurialism, like history, it's always been in the middle. It's been small businesses that have been supporting people, and there's like enough to go around. And then like, it is like the Jack Welches of the world with GE and everything that are coming in, and then they're just like dismantling shit and then scaling it. And then like the company and everything lost its soul along the way. And I'm like, what if we gave things more soul again and like really leaned into that, and you just like enjoyed it, It's so I personally have this very deep theory. I don't know why it's my theory, but it's like people feel like it is that black or white. So you have to grow and scale. And in that process, you come to hate your company. So then you sell your company because you're like, this is the only path out, because you're like, I either have to burn it down or I have to sell it. And so obviously also the only path in the black and white world is that I have to sell it. You can't like rethink about how could you build it and love it. And then so many founders that I meet that have sold companies, they're like, I'm actually not happy. Like, I'm not like, you know, they just then want to build again and they kind of miss it. Like, it's like that secret conversation that happens so much. And like, when you talk to founders that have sold, like they won't publicly say it, but they're like, I wish I hadn't have sold because like it was your thing, you know? And so I really want people to think about now more. I'm like, what would have to be true for you to love your company again, you know? And I think that's like, like if we start having those conversations, like that would be crazy. And like I myself even went through, like I started hating my company and I also wanted to sell it because I was like, this is the only way out. And then I have to do a lot of work, but like really like I was like, what would need to be true for me to love this company again and for me to want to have it? And I think that's like, if we could just start talking about that more, I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, I think that is counter to capitalism. Like we're not supposed to love our jobs or love our company, right? And when you get to that point, when you're talking about selling, your company is only worth its margin, right? Like the margin, that EBITDA calculation, that is all that matters. So suddenly the soul is stripped, you know, you don't add your soul back, right? There's add backs, but the soul isn't part of it. And in order to truly sell a company for its maximum value, you almost can't have a soul. So I think it's interesting that you bring up that word soul, because when we talk about the value of an organization, or you talk about like, you know, at Clockwork, we built Clockwork for 24 years. And at the end of it, the value of the company isn't the people, the jobs we created, the partners we made, the opportunities we found along the way. It's what was the margin? How many people did you lay off? That's the subtext, right? How many people did you lay off? How did you control costs? How did you continue to make that number bigger? How did you hustle harder? All of that plays into the valuation of an organization. And I personally struggle with that. And I think that is what sets great CEOs by the standard definition apart from the rest of us who care, who care about, like the great CEOs are not necessarily the people who care about people, who care about, I mean, maybe they care about product, but what they really care about is that margin. Am I wrong?
No, I mean, I think there's in late stage capitalism, we like money is like the only thing for some reason that we like look at and everything. But I mean, I think that there are really good CEOs out there, but they're not the ones that are gaining the write-ups. Like, you know, unfortunately in the modern era, like we love sensationalism and like, you know, it's all of this, you know, like 40 billion, like, you know, dollars. Like, I mean, when we were growing up, like the idea of like you are 1 million was like insane. And now we talk about people that, you know, like, yes, own like in all of Hawaii and everything. But I think it's like, this is the interesting thing is like the feeling, like in the knowing, I think that's where it's like really weird, like, or interesting is because like you can say everything about like the EBITDA and like how did you maintain margin and everything like that, but everything that you think about, you know, in your experiences is the people and is the experiences. And like, that is that idea, you know? And so I'm always like, I personally am always like, how can there be people and profits? Like, why is it always this or, you know, like what would happen if we said, and I think that's like really interesting. And I would rather have conversations about that and kind of get into there, you know, like how can like both things be true? So yeah.
Yeah,
yes,
I totally agree.
To everything.
Right. What do you think is the most CEO-like thing you've ever been told you should do that you absolutely refuse to do?
I mean, I did do it, which was the scale, like, you know, grow at all costs. And I hated that process. I didn't realize it because I just was like, because to scale at all costs, it means that you have to just start doing every single tactic under the sun, you know, and you're just like trying and doing all these things that honestly, a lot of times will probably go against your values. And it wasn't until I realized like, I don't have to do that. And so I stopped doing it. And then I was like, oh, this is great. And then the weird thing is when we stopped doing that, we actually started growing like very organically. Cause like, surprise, people can tell when you're having a good time, like in like as woo as it sounds, like this idea of like energy, like you're like, oh, that like they're fucking like they're wearing a storm up there, they're having a good time, like whatever this is, like I want more of that, you know. And that's like the cool thing. So when we stopped doing all of the tactics, it became really fun. And then I was like, oh, okay. Now I'm like, actually, like, I'm like, and it's growing. Like, I don't know how to do forecasts anymore. I'm like, I don't know, you guys, what's going to happen this month? I mean, I can do them, but I usually am off. So yeah, which is great because it just is like organically growing. And that's cool because that's also is great for your bottom line because you're just not forcing everything into every fucking marketing strategy known under the sun, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was there a moment for you that almost broke you? And I mean, not the stuff, you know, you're going to put in your newsletter, but like a moment where you thought, I can't do this anymore. It's killing me.
I would say there's a couple. I would say there was some quarterly planning sessions where it was like with other like leadership people. And I was just like, this feels fucking terrible. If this is what it is, like, I just don't want this right now. Like, you know, it's like, oh, how do we, you know, scale it to X this year and everything like that. And then it's like, oh, we're going to do like this tactic and this strategy and this and that. And I just was like, this just all sounds terrible, like, because it just also was like we're just like doing everything by force instead of being like by like joy and like fun and everything. And I just was like, I don't think I really, all I knew was like literally after that like quarterly planning session, I just went in my car and cried. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? And I also just paid an extreme amount of money for this planning session. And I just was like, what is going on? Like, it just like this, if this is what this is, I just don't want this. And it wasn't like then the next day I woke up and I was like, we're gonna change. Like, you know, it was like a ton of hard work. I like have an executive coach that really like, I've had a couple now that really like flipped it for me. And like, I've told you, you're like stuck with me for life now. Like, you know, so yeah. But I mean, I think any entrepreneur is lying if they haven't said like that. There's been so many moments I think that have broken me, you know, like even when I was like small, like, you know, you're doing an event. I was like looking at photos and it was like I was doing an outdoor event and literally like a rainstorm came through and like my booth had exploded, like, you know, like the tent wall had come in. So I'm just like, I was like, oh cool. I was like, all right, yeah, well this would make sense. You guys, you set up your booth outside and you put fabric over it and you're like, I am indestructible. So yeah.
That's hilarious. Yeah. I actually think I can't count the number of moments where I've had like a booth collapsing, you know, experience where I start singing to myself, entrepreneurism is so glamorous, you know, like where I'm cleaning up vomit or, yes. I mean, honestly, I think it's funny that what we feature are the perfect finished final product photos. And the majority of the time is spent, you know, cleaning up after somebody or doing something decidedly unsexy. And we don't talk about that enough. And I think that's, you know, that's all part of the journey, but it's also part of the fun. I mean, in the moment you're getting drenched by a storm and you probably weren't thrilled, but looking back on it, those are the moments that make you. That's the stuff that makes you who you are.
Yeah. I mean, I think the key thing that I do see in a lot of entrepreneurs that like, it's just you're fucking resilient or we're just like, so like fucking stupid that we're just like, nothing can keep us down. We're just like, the universe is like, will you stay down? And we're like, nah, I can't, man. Like you're going to have to like bite my ear off or something like that. Like stay down. Anyways, that was a weird, wrestling reference or whatever. So boxing.
I like it. I like it. You know, actually that calls to mind this idea of working for someone else. You know, you said earlier, I can always go back to teaching, but could you? I mean, at this point, could you work for someone else?
No. I 100% couldn't work for someone else. I mean, the one nice thing about teaching, I would say, is it's entrepreneurial-ish adjacent because you do run your own classroom. Like you do have to answer to a principal, but not really, unless you're really fucking up. Because I think this is always the funny thing, because one of my dear friends is a principal, is she technically has 80 direct reports. And in the land of like, if you think about it, you know, like a principal technically has 80 direct reports. And if you thought about that in like, you know, entrepreneur org chart, they literally everybody was like, what the fuck? You know, they said like 6, you know, 8 max. So you do have this level of autonomy, you know, like kind of like what's going on in your classroom and everything. That being said, I would still never go back to it because I'm like, I think what I realized when I pivoted was I was like, that was hard for me in teaching was I was like, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to make for the rest of my life, no matter how hard or how little. And then I was like, well, this is like, I'm just not that pure of a soul, I think. So, but I wouldn't now. I think because once something cool happens on the entrepreneurial journey where I think it's like you have an idea and you can build it and you can craft it exactly how you want. And I think that's like, even in the past couple of years, like you hear things, you're like, oh, like, you know, get everybody's input on stuff, you know, and like, you know, like sometimes you have to compromise or whatever. And it's not to say that I don't really, but I'm like, my vision is my vision and I want it to like come to life, you know? And so sometimes it's uncomfortable and I like have to just be like, no, like, you know, people can give their input, but also at the end of the day, I have to love it and I want to see it in real life. And that's like the biggest thing because you know when you've compromised on your vision and it feels like shit, you know, because you chose making everybody else comfortable, but you sacrificed your vision. And that just is not fun. So sometimes it's more like talking about like why it might have to be that way. But no, even talking about this, like I've been able to build so many cool things. So no, I'd always pick entrepreneurism. Like it's so cool. Like it's so fucking, it's hard and cool. I mean, but that's like the funness of it. You know, it's like that roller coaster, you know, and everything like that. You wouldn't know joy if you didn't know hard, you know, and if we said, that's why I always kind of hated this idea of work-life balance because it always made it sound like you had to have things like in the middle, like it's 50-50. And honestly, that sounds boring. Like really boring.
Yeah, every good entrepreneur I know is slightly traumatized, if not totally traumatized. You know, they have like all this unresolved
damage.
Yes, yes, yes. It probably came from their family systems. Their systems of, you know, their families of origin probably set them up to like need that constant churn in their emotional body. You know, you're a mother, and I think that women have it particularly difficult in the entrepreneurial space. How do you handle the mom guilt? You know, yesterday I told you I was in Montana and we were driving to the airport and my spouse brought up some memory that she had with my son and with our son. And I was not involved in this memory. And it was very clear because she followed it up with, you were busy, you were on the road, you were building clockwork, like you don't have this story, you know, in your arsenal because you weren't there. And you weren't there for a lot of it. And that was a moment where I was like, wow, that's your perception. Like your perception is I wasn't there. And yet we did talk about it. We talked about how we wanted to raise our children before we had any, and ultimately our kid, and what my life would look like compared to hers, and how she would sort of craft her career around his school and life, etc. But I'm curious, like, how do you handle the mom guilt? You know, when you're sort of up against that founder hustle. And I think when we talk about it, it becomes this extension of our social media or our personal brand, where it's this perfectly curated language. And I don't think anything about it can be perfectly curated because it's really hard. So how do you balance the mom guilt with the founder hustle?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. And even like when you were like asking me that question, I think like I've gone through a lot of seasons of it. Like when my daughter, who's 7 now, was first born, literally she was on the air. I was 1 month postpartum. I had a C-section. I was on an airplane with her, and we were going to a trade show in New York City because I had to set it up. And like she was strapped to me, but I remember that my husband was with me, but it was I was like, oh my God, I was like such a wreck during that because they were like, you can't have infants on the trade show floor when you're setting up. And I was like, well, I gotta breastfeed her. I was like, what do you mean? And so like, I mean, who knows where the hormones were going and everything like that. But I think I also have just been like, I want to bring them along, so I include them. Like, they tend to come to like, they were like, I did an event yesterday for Jesse Diggins and like, I included them in that because it's such an interesting snapshot. So I try to include them. And then also like, I hope at some point I can use their child labor as well, for like doing stuff, but it's hard, but I think I've kind of gotten to a point where like I say, like, these are my non-negotiables. So like, I don't want to live a life where I don't feel like I can't also do their things, so I say no to a lot of other things so that I can do the ones that are important to me, but I also know the things that I don't want to do, like we have like a strict rule in our household, which is like only one after school thing because I'm just like, it's too much. I also don't remember doing all of the shit that everybody does for their kids now. Like, I'm just like, I don't remember this, and like the craziness of going to all of these different camps and like all of these things. Like my kids go to the exact same camp all summer long, and part of that requirement is that you have early drop off and extended hours. Like my kids do not do the 3-hour camps. Like that's just, it doesn't work for us. And I think that's where it's like, you have to admit what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and that's okay. And I think that idea of the okayest energy, like your kids are going to be just fine at the end of the day, but it's no sense getting yourself bent out of shape about it. So I think like learning that, like, and if, my kids are 5 and 7, so they're young. So I'm going to say like the term play dates, but yeah, like they had a play date. I did not pick up the house. Like, I mean, I think this idea of like, it was like this book, Meditation for Mortals, that I love. It's like 30 days. You read this like 2 or 3, and he was like, can we just like, you want to have like a house party, you want to have people over, but this like idea of cleaning up your house is what's freaking you out. And you're like, I don't want to do that. But the idea is you want to get people together. So just have the people together and be like, stop. Like, this is my life. This is how we live. I also like, yeah, for me, I've never understood this, like, because I'm like, the dishes don't care. Like, I don't go to like there are dishes in the sink right now. Like I can very easily go to sleep with having dishes in the sink. Like it is okay. Like, so I've never held that. Like the dishes aren't angry at me. They don't think, they're not like, oh my God, they're not judging me. Like, how could Larissa do this? They don't fucking care.
I love that because I think it's actually like the moral of the comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
Is really what you've just described, because we compare ourselves to each other. And, my spouse and I were saying this recently, like we haven't had many dinner parties lately because there are things we would change about our house. Well, when are we going to change those things about our house? Because we're busy. So what do we want? Do we want the people over? Do we want to entertain people and have, our friends be nearby? Or do we want to keep putting all of that off because there are things we would change about our house? Yeah. And I think, we're living in this era where keeping up with the Joneses is something that we all really emphasize. And, social media is a huge proponent of that because we see this much of an influencer's kitchen. We think, look at her kitchen. It's so pretty. And mine, could use an update. And I love that attitude. I actually love your whole, I think the reason that you and I are pals is because you're sort of a no bullshit kind of person. And I appreciate that about you. And I think it's what drew me to you. But how do you surround yourself, or how do you hire people that can handle your no bullshit energy? Have you found that to be an issue in moments?
I think in the past, we're pretty like thorough in hiring, I would say. Like I have crafted some really interesting questions over the time. I actually some of them were like riffs off of there's a book called what is it? The 15 Commitments of Unconscious Leadership. It's kind of like coaching adjacent, but if you Google that and then you look for interview questions, they have really interesting interview questions. And that is, so interviews, I think people forget about. They're the one time that you get to ask somebody something and they have to answer you. When does that happen in life? Like, like it's kind of like crazy, but it allows for you, like, that's your time. Like, unfortunately, it's also your only time where you're saying, like, I'm going to get to meet you for this snapshot, and then we're going into an agreement. So there's a lot of weight on it. So ask the questions you're really curious about, especially with that person. So there's like a couple of them, but it's like one of them is like, tell me about a time that you participated in making work situation, like hostile or like not good, because we've all fucked up, and if somebody like can say like, I've never done, like, I just like, but what I more want to see from that is like what you learned, because we've all fucked up, but like, what did you learn along the way? And I really try to also look in for interviews. If there's too much like black or white thinking, then it's a no for me. I really look for people that can live in the gray, and realize also that we're going to make mistakes, but can we all collectively work together and figure it out and everything, and we are untraditional, but of a work environment, but we're also like, we want people to like dig in deep. And I think because we are untraditional and we allow people to show up as they are, they're willing to also, commit to building this really weird thing and everything. But I really like, we're pretty intentional, like, about who we want to work with now. And I think that's what's really cool. And Kevin Kelly, yeah, I think it's like he has a really cool one where I've done it on like bigger hires before, because I know it's weird asking for references now. So he always calls someplace and he's like, if you highly recommend this person, please get back to me. And it's a really fun strategy to kind of like, yeah, like, because if somebody really was like, this person was a 10 out of 10 to work with, you will bend over backwards to make sure that you can set that person up. So I think like, there's some cool ways. So, but I do invest a lot in the hiring process because we've all made bad hires, and boy, does that like just suck. Like, I mean, it just zaps the energy of your company, yourself. Like, I always like, when I'm coaching people and myself, like if I realize I'm starting to talk about somebody too much, like that has a high cost, in running your company. And like, that's a high cost to you and yourself. Like, what would you be doing if you weren't constantly talking about this person and like performance management and like all of that shit, So yeah, I really like, yeah, it's a big deal bringing somebody into your ecosystem.
It is. So you're my inaugural guest, and I haven't even scratched the surface of the questions that I want to ask you. Would you be willing to come on for a part 2?
Oh yeah, of course.
I mean, I put you on the spot. We're recording. It's like, not like you're going to say no right now. So one of the things that I want to
volunteer.
Right. Thank you. One of the things that I want to do at the end of all of these podcasts that I want to start with you is this rapid fire questionnaire. Did you ever watch Inside the Actors Studio with James Lipton?
Yeah.
So, he used the Proust questionnaire at the end of his. I wanted my own. I want the Nancy questionnaire. Yeah. So I'm asking everybody the same set of questions, but you are officially the first person to answer these, and they're rapid fire. Are you ready? Okay. So
sure.
What is the most correct piece of advice you've ever ignored?
I don't ignore it anymore. It's honestly probably a piece of advice I live by the most, but I think I felt weird about it in the beginning, which was, you're already at a no, so you might as well ask.
I love it.
That one's, yeah. I think at the first I was always like, oh, but what if they hate me or whatever? I was like, who fucking cares? So, yeah.
What's a rule in your industry that you take pleasure in breaking?
Honestly, like the jewelry industry in general is just like not us, like it's full of swear words and everything. Like I'm always trying to figure out how to make like the anti-Valentine's Day, like the fact that like how much like the jewelry industry, like the open heart collection, kill me. So yes.
So all of it basically.
Yeah.
When was the last time you said no when everybody expected a yes?
I kind of pretty recently, actually. I like turned down a public speaking thing because I was pretty zapped. Like I just like, we had built National Loon Day and it was pretty shortly after, and I just was looking at my schedule. I was like, I I of course could say yes. It was a really good opportunity for me, and but I also knew like I couldn't give it what I wanted to give it, and so I've kind of gotten better for sure at saying no, even to things that I really want to do, just because I know like it just doesn't make fucking sense for me at this moment. And I'm honestly really glad I did, because I still am like, I think, recovering from National Loon Day. So yeah,
you're brilliant. We'll talk about National Loon Day in the part 2 of this.
Yeah, part 2
of this episode. What is your favorite way to spend unproductive time?
We live on a lake. Honestly, like zoning out and looking at a lake is probably one of my favorites. But my partner and I, we started doing this thing, which I really have not met anybody else that does this. But so we take solo trips. Mm-hmm. So 4 times a year, we each go out solo, and like you're just by yourself, or it's your time to fuck around. You can do whatever the fuck you want during this time, you know? So like in November, I went to like Marfa, Texas by myself and just like hiked around. But honestly, it's just like my best unproductive time is just like me being with myself and just like not having all the constant inputs. Like, because it is when you're a mom and an entrepreneur, like the amount of input you get in a day, like the questions and everything like that. I just call it like everything's coming in you and you're just like, oh my God. So like my best is like when I'm like, oh, like everybody in like very much like tell people like, this is you do not like, I am not textable. Like, you know, all of these things. So yeah.
I love it. What if you could send a 1-sentence anonymous text to your 22-year-old self, what would it say?
Probably, it's a fucking wild ride.
I like
That's
it.
what kind of came to mind, because it's just going to be a wild ride. Buckle
I like
up.
it.
Yeah.
I like it. What is your personal hell? What's a situation or environment you absolutely cannot stand?
Oh man, there's many I can't stand. Definitely when I get to networking can be a little hard for me at times, especially when I don't feel like there's anybody that's being real. That's really hard. Like, I mean, just like, you know, nobody that's like dropping fuck bombs, like everything just feels like a little too curated, a little like too Stepford Wives, you know, like it just like something feels like I'm like in 2026, I expect like some people to show up and be authentically themselves, you know, and it just helps me a little bit. But when it's like I'm the only one, then yeah.
That's why you just need to call me when those things happen. And then the last question is, what's one thing you are trying to unlearn?
Oh, it's the growth. I mean, I've kind of unlearned it now. It's like the growth at all costs, which is such a common thing. Yeah. And I think now
that's good.
Yeah, that's
good.
it.
Growth at all costs. You were sacrificing yourself to grow. Yeah. Yeah. Larissa Loden, I love you. I think you're the best. I love, you know, I don't know if the world knows this, but the reason that I met you is because you made a pair of earrings that you named after my Twitter handle.
Yeah.
And I don't even have pierced ears, but I bought them for everybody I've ever met. Everybody. Someday I'll have to tell you the story of the pierced ears situation, because I did try on many occasions. I went to the Claire's. I did it the way you're supposed to do it. I went on a date, a dude kissed my ear and I bled down my neck afterwards. So that was cool. I mean, that was telling me, A, you're gay, B, don't wear earrings, C, don't put holes in your body that weren't there to begin with. You know, things like that. I think you're swell. I really appreciate you being my inaugural guest. I'm sorry about all the issues that I knew we would have. And I appreciate in advance that you're going to come back and answer some more questions for me, because I have so many. Thank you for being here, Larissa.
This was the best. Thank you. I'm so pumped to be your first guest. Like, honestly, I was like, when you texted me, I was like, I would be honored. So I'm so pumped for round 2.
Thank you.
I'm breaking all your rules.